ain't sleeping till Hollywood. We ain't sleeping.
Hello. You are listening to the No Sleep Till Hollywood podcast. We're not sleeping until we make it in Hollywood. And while we're up, we will be discussing the state of the industry and our place in it. It's your girl, Gaelyn Smith.
And it's your boy, Caleb McDonald. And today...
Tell us what we're talking about today, cousin.
All right, cousin, I will tell you right now, cousin. We are talking about The Bear.
If you couldn't figure that out, I mean, they say cousin at least 100 times an episode. So.
And that's only between like two characters.
That's only between two people. Add the other four people, and then it's like, Lord Jesus.
Right. Other than that, it's chef.
Cousin and chef. Those are the only two words.
But season 2 recently released on June 22nd.
A nice little early birthday present for me.
And so, you know, it dropped. We've been letting it marinate.
And that's also a very polite way of saying Gaelyn just finished it last night.
And now we're ready to dig in. You know, I will say I only started watching it this year.
So did I. I didn't watch it. So I watched season 1 back in February, and then I watched season 2 now, essentially.
Gotcha. No, because for me, like, I tried to watch it, and I did get, like, 4 episodes in. Do I remember anything?
No.
Because, the first season, I think anybody could agree, is chaotic storytelling. Like, it's...
Intentionally chaotic storytelling.
Intentionally.
Yeah.
But chaotic nonetheless.
Yes.
And so for it to be all over the place, and then Hulu got ads at the time.
Well, that's because I was gonna say Hulu only got ads because we got the low tiers. Okay, I have the student plan, so me and my ads do just fine.
So that being said, there was just a lot of like racing
thoughts. Is that what you're trying to say? I don't know what you're trying to say, but I'm going with racing thoughts. I feel like that's where you're going.
Brain farts. There we go. Brain farts on what was going on in the whole show.
Copy. Let's get into what the show is about so y'all understand why it was a little chaotic. Then we'll go back to season 1 for a second. But the series logline, and I quote, "A young chef from the fine dining world comes home to Chicago to run his family sandwich shop after a heartbreaking death in his family. A world away from what he's used to, Carmi must balance the soul-crushing realities of small business ownership, his strong-willed and recalcitrant kitchen staff, and his strained familial relationships, all while grappling with the impact of his brother's suicide. As Carmi fights to transform both the shop and himself, he works alongside a rough, around-the-edges kitchen crew that ultimately reveals itself as his chosen family." That's a lot of words. Basically, it is a workplace dramedy. Well, a workplace drama at the speed of a comedy about a small local restaurant in Chicago. That's the fast way of saying it. All them extra words, while relevant and true, they're just a lot of words. But for those of you guys who have not seen the show yet, or if you know it's been a second since you remembered it, season 1 starts with Carmi returning. Basically, it's like the prodigal return of the prodigal son back to the restaurant that his cousin and his brother were running, called The Original Beef. His brother Michael has committed suicide before the events of the show, and that's why Carmi is coming back to basically take over that family restaurant. And Carmi comes from fine dining experience. He's been away. He studied in France, we learned, or in France and in Denmark. He's where he did a lot of his formal training, and then he came back to like fine dining restaurants in New York and Chicago. He ran a restaurant in New York, and then he had some type of burnout experience that we start to unpack slowly throughout the show. And then he comes back home to Chicago to The Original Beef. And everybody at The Original Beef, they're just people who work in kitchens, right? Like they haven't had formal dining and culinary experience. They just know how to make these sandwiches that are The Original Beef. And so Carmi comes in with his like fine dining training, and it's a lot of like clashing of worlds and experiences coming together to try and save the sandwich shop. At the end of season 1, Carmi and Sydney, who becomes one of the other protagonists of the show, they decide to shut down The Original Beef as it was to open The Bear, which is a idea that Carmi had proposed to his brother before his passing. And season 2 takes place with, it's like the 12 weeks before that opening, and it's the process of opening the restaurant. I feel like that's enough background
no,
information.
I would say that's succinct.
Okay. I was trying to
kept
make it
necessary.
speedy.
Mhm.
Because there's a lot of other stuff going on, but I was trying to give him like the need to
No.
knows.
And what's also interesting to point out, not that it's totally relevant,
Mhm.
is that like the season, it should be better known as The Bear Part 2, because that's how the season opened up.
That is true.
And I think that's something very much to consider, because like I know some people were saying, oh, season 1 could have been its own limited series and like that could have been it, but they came back, and they came back as Part 2, not just season 2.
Yeah, which I forgot about just because I feel like they play a lot with titling in the show. Like sometimes the title card comes earlier or later, and that changes how we're supposed to see the episode. So I think that's an interesting one. Or like if we look at episode 6 of season 2 with the, a flashback episode to a very eventful Christmas. They change at the end of the show, they call it the Bearzados. And that was almost as if it was its own separate like movie within the series. So it's a very, they play a lot, and that's why I said it's like a drama at the pace of a comedy, because the first season was very much like 30 to 35-minute episodes. In season 2, they get a little loose with the episode times, because I was like, all right, this one's 30, and then episode 6 was randomly an hour, and then after that they kind of were like 40 minutes. So they kind of play with time. And I think what I really enjoy about The Bear is it's not limited and defined by a genre. It's like we're telling the story that we're telling. If you want to call it a comedy, if you want to call it a drama, that's not really our business, but we're telling this very specific story about a brother trying to, maintain the legacy of another brother, of an Italian American family living in Chicago, of, working class and working class people. Like it's a very specific story about what it's trying to do.
And a note on the storytelling is I love how they tell their stories, not just in the story way of like, oh, like you're watching multiple things unfold at once, but the cinematography.
Yes.
So pretty.
The way they shoot this show is crazy.
So pretty.
It's
like
so like that's a whole episode right there.
They'll show you like the time, like hands chopping, the clock ticking. They will focus in on all the details, and you understand the gravity of what that little thing means.
And especially as somebody who's worked in restaurants, I've been a server a few times in a few different types of restaurants, like the pacing of the camera really puts you in the world of the kitchen. It moves very, like, there are episodes that move very slow. There are episodes that move very fast, but every time it feels like what my experience in the service industry was. Like it looks like it feels like it, the pacing of the dialogue, the pacing of the camera. The camera is very good at, sometimes the camera follows what's happening and sometimes the camera is ahead of what's happening, but it's very intentional and specific, and you understand why as long as you just keep watching.
And something else is, there's tons of shows. Where work is included in the narrative, but you don't necessarily get down to it.
Right.
And maybe like it does go into it a little bit, but it doesn't make you care.
Yeah.
This show makes me care.
Makes you care. Like, even if you don't understand the difference between ingredients, you understand why it's important that it was one versus the other. Like, you might not know what it means, but you're like, nah, but that matters.
Right. And also, like, Ted Lasso, for instance, right? I'm not a sports fan.
Okay, don't talk about too much about season 3 because I ain't seen it yet.
Of course. With Ted Lasso, they do talk about football, right?
Right.
And so, if it was a more intense show that like dived more into it, I'm sure I would care about the positions and like, like the defense, there. But here, not only do I care that the dishes come out well, I care that like the temperature was right, the timer was set, that it was plated correctly.
Which is definitely a season 2 thing, because in season 1, that's not what mattered, and therefore that's not what you focused on. What mattered, I think, and that's the interesting part, is that season 1 showed you a chaotic restaurant. And because we're coming in as Carmi and Sydney, who are in a sense new to this place, we just see chaos, which is what they see. and they're coming from a trained perspective of how to fix it, but we just see chaos. Whereas in season 2, there is also chaos, but what we start to realize, and what I said to Caleb last night after I finished the episode, was like, we think in season 1 that the chaos is the original beef. But then when we switch restaurants, when we add new people in, when we add in new systems and we still see chaos, what we understand is the chaos is Carmy. Like, Carmy brings a certain amount of chaos with him. And I think a lot of I think, to me, what I'm getting from the show, at least right now, is that the chaos of the restaurant is a physical manifestation of what's going on inside of Carmy. Like, there's a lot of trauma. There's a lot of like feelings that he needs to deal with, especially around his familial relationships. I mean, his brother's committed suicide. His mother drives a car into their house on Christmas Eve. Like, there's a lot of like stuff to unpack there that he hasn't unpacked. And therefore he brings chaos with him. Because one of the big things in his backstory is that he was like the head chef at like the #1 restaurant in the world.
Yeah, let's talk about Carmy.
Yeah, and like he decides to just like dip out.
Right.
Because he can't handle the pressure.
Well,
he cracks under. We never fully 100% find out exactly what happens, but we're led to believe that he cracks under the pressure. And I don't know if that how like much that's tied to, like, I don't know exactly in the timeline of the story when Michael died. So like, I don't know if that was like the straw that broke the camel's back or something that already happened when he was in his descent. But like, it very much gives like he couldn't handle the pressure. And there was some other like anxiety and trauma. Like, I think he couldn't handle the pressure, and there was also other stuff happening within him that he wasn't able to like communicate.
Okay, because I thought it was that he was working at that restaurant, but then the brother died, and so he just dropped everything. I
think that's where it's a little unclear and a little fuzzy, and I don't know if that's intentional. Like, I don't know if that's like a season 3 problem or like an error in writing, so to speak. You know what I mean?
But I would say, I mean, at least from what we saw, he was handling the pressure like to a point. Like,
in season 1 or season 2?
In season, I'm talking about the backstory. Like, even though like it was high intensity, it's not like the second things got high intense, he was like, all right. Like, no, like he was plating while his top chef was telling him, you should kill yourself. You should this.
But we don't know that that's actually what happened. Because remember, we also deal with a big thing about the show is also like we see a lot of stuff that doesn't happen. So it's like, was that the pressure that was in his head and that got manifested onto that person, or is that actually what was said? And that's where it's unclear. The part that we're like the things that we know for sure is that he worked in that restaurant and he was the top chef. Okay, that's what we know happened. That's a lot of the other parts of it. Are like, because remember, he has like anxiety and paranoia, like he deals with like those things. There's a lot of moments where it's like, did this happen? You sure this happened?
And something that does make his brother's suicide ultimately that much more tragic is that we do learn that he and his brother were not on the best of terms before the passing.
Right.
And that wasn't necessarily because of Carmy.
Right.
Like, Carmy was getting pushed out by his brother. His brother didn't want him working at the original beef.
His brother was also on drugs. That's also super important to mention.
Right. And so, like, there's this excommunicado, and then, boom, he's dead. Now, Carmy is picking up where his brother left off.
I think there's a lot of resentment for Carmy within his family. Like, I think that, like, his mother, his sister, and his, now dead brother resented him. Because I think that there was this point where the older siblings realized that Carmy had a gift that could get him out of this very toxic situation. And because he was the only one of the Berzatto kids who got to leave, I think as much as they wanted that for him, they resented his ability to do so. And so then when he comes back around, it's this weird like dynamic of like, happy to see you, also hate that you got to have this experience that I never will get to have. Like, they got stuck being around, caring for their mother, and all of we don't really know exactly what's up with their mom, but like we know that like she has some mental health issues, and I think in the Thanksgiving episode, it's alluded that she might have some issues with alcohol, and so like they got stuck dealing with that while he got to go off and experience the world. And like, not for nothing, like Carmy's a little bit of a butthead in season 1. Like, he comes in and he's just like, we call people chef. And we need to wear clean shirts and we need to do X, Y, Z. And it's like, these are people who are used to wearing the same t-shirt to work every day. And that's like there was a little bit of like a pretentiousness that came in, and it wasn't necessarily like him intentionally trying to talk down on people. It's just like how he was trained. These are what you do.
Right. He wasn't teaching for them to understand. He was teaching for them to know.
Right.
Like, no, okay, chef. We call each other chef. We have positions, okay? He said, all right, you know what? This isn't working. Instead of him coming to everyone in the restaurant and saying, all right, we're going to start chain of command, he delegated that task to his sous chef.
To Sydney, and Sydney, this is like Sydney's first real world experience outside of, training. And Sydney's new, and I think what I really appreciated about the character of Sydney, played by Ayo Edebiri, is that Sydney, because what's interesting is it's not a Black show, but the majority of the cast is Black, which is interesting because the owner of the restaurant is white, and the leadership team is predominantly white, minus Sydney, who gets added to the leadership team in the middle of season 1 and towards season 2. But the people who work there are Black, mostly. And this thing of Sydney wasn't the sassy Black sidekick. She was a sidekick in a sense, but she's like this very she knows a lot about food. She does not know a lot about dealing with people and communication. So her communication skills leave a lot to be desired, right? Like she stutters a lot. She trips over her words. She's very unsure about how to say things to people to get things done. And so a lot of her arc was about learning how to step into her power and learning how to dictate and delegate and tell people what she needed from them in a way that they understood, but also would therefore then act on. And I thought that was such an interesting choice, because it would have been real easy to have Carmi, who already can't really deal with people, and then have it be y'all need to go ahead and do this because that could have been that would have been an easy choice that could work. I'm not opposed to it, but I think this was such a more nuanced and complicated choice that then questions our ability of what a Black woman looks like. Because I think a lot of times, especially in restaurants, when you have a Black, working staff, white folks like to then use the Black person to dictate and delegate to other Black people. And Sydney was not the character that could do that. And so therefore it required a different nuance of conversation, which I thought was super interesting.
Because we are talking about other chefs in the kitchen, I do want to, a character that stole my heart and I didn't expect it was Tina. I love Tina.
I love Tina.
Because, we come into the show and she is like a hardened woman.
Yes.
She's like, I know what I'm doing.
She is I think she's Puerto Rican in the show, like Black and Puerto Rican, something like that. But she's older, she's probably in her 40s or 50s, but
right.
She been there, done that, got the t-shirts. She don't care.
And she says to Sydney when Sydney's trying to give everyone their missions and tasks, I know what I'm doing, leave me alone. And then there's one time where, there's a mishap in the kitchen. She has to pour something out, and when she goes to go fix it, Sydney already fixed it. And I think that was Tina's first time accepting help. And the only reason why she accepted it was because there was nothing she could do.
She knew she was wrong. She jacked that up.
Okay, she tasted it and she was shocked. She said, oh.
Her face, she was like...
She said, maybe I should be listening a little bit. And to see her there in season 1 and in season 2, she's helping someone who got hardened over the course of time and is teaching the new way. That was, and
her seeing her at the end teaching the new servers, the new people in the kitchen. She became the person who was resistant to new ways to then almost a carrier of the new guard of just really making and facilitating that change and growth.
Which this show definitely has to be a dramedy, because why were one of the chefs smoking meth?
No, it was crack. It was crack. Okay. Let's be very specific. It was crack. Literally, he pulled out that pipe. In my head, I went, crack, rock, crack, rock. Crack, rock, crack, rock.
No, because, of all the things...
If they had played that song at that moment, I promise you, I'd still be laughing from last night. Because why did Frank Ocean make that song? Because Frank Ocean, like, there were 2 songs on that album back to back about being high out your mind. And I just want to understand, babes, what was going on?
Was there a dark place? No.
Crack. It's not a little weed. Crack.
Yeah, no.
But he was smoking crack. And then my favorite part was Marcus going out there discovering that because it's like, if in the final episode, they're looking for this guy named Josh for like the last 30 minutes of the episode. They're like, where's Josh? Where's Josh? Where's Josh? Marcus goes outside, finds Josh smoking crack. And then he's like, I think I have to fire you.
But
and the guy's like, are you sure? And he's like, I'm not sure. Let me go ask. He's like, you're being so weird right now. It's like, he's being weird. Him.
Right.
And then it's like he goes in the city. You're not gonna believe what I saw. He was smoking crack. Can I fire him? She's like, yes.
Immediately.
Actually.
Absolutely. And since we brought him up, Marcus,
hilarious.
I want to give that man a hug. I want to taste one of his desserts.
I love Marcus. He's such a sweet, like, I think that's what I really appreciated about his character is that he was a very just like a nice man. Like he's a large black man, and it would have been really easy to make him mean and scary and gruff. And like, he is the nicest, sweetest man. All he wants to do is make pastries. The episode in season 1, when Carmi comes at him crazy.
And throws it on the floor?
And throws it on the floor and was like, I don't care about your donut right now. And mind you, he's been working the whole season to get these donuts correct.
Right.
He finally gets it right. And Carmi just throws it on. And mind you, they were in the middle of a rush. He probably should not have been working on that donut at that time. But to throw that thing on the ground like that, oh, baby, I was finished. I was in tears. I said, what you won't ever do is disrespect Marcus.
And then for this season, Marcus, like, he had his little trip in the sun.
Baby, he went to Copenhagen, okay? And I loved it.
He learned under Will Poulter's character, whose name I forget, but
yeah, I don't remember the character's name.
A top Michelin chef.
He was a chef over in Denmark. Okay, that's what we need to know.
Which something that I think was like told through imagery.
Okay.
If you remember, Will Poulter, he was like, his character was saying that he was side by side with the best,
and it was Carmi,
the absolute best chef. Yeah, and then later in Richie's episode.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing about season 2, because I want to get into what you're alluding to. Mm-hmm. Season 2, I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I thought it was mid. Like, I'm watching it, and like each episode, I'm like, okay. And then they start like following individual characters. So the episode Caleb's talking about, I believe, is episode 3, and we follow Marcus on his trip to Copenhagen. Yes. But it's like these individual episodes where like we don't see the restaurant. We don't, or like we'll see the restaurant for like 3 minutes of a 35-minute episode.
And it's not even the restaurant. It's
the constructions.
Yeah.
So it's like it'll be like that, and then we follow somebody else for the entire episode, having their own separate journeys and experiences. And I'm just like, after each episode, I would go, well, that was a beautiful episode, but I don't understand what the story, like, where's the restaurant? What's going on back there? Like, I'm like, I want to know. And I'm not understanding the storytelling. And then it would come back in moments. So like, I remember like the Thanksgiving episode is episode 6. And I'm like, why the heck are we flashing back to 5 years ago? Christmas episode. Thank you. I was like, why are we flashing back to 5 years ago? I don't understand. And over the course of episode 7, 8, 9, and 10, things from that episode specifically came back. But then, like what Caleb was saying, in that, I believe it was episode 8 is Richie's episode, I want to say, 7 or 8. When Richie's staging, which is essentially like a chef internship, is how I understand it. He is at a restaurant that Carmi worked at, and then we see the picture of Will Poulter's character and Carmi. And you're like, oh, when he said the best, he meant Carmi, and that helps us to understand that Carmi was the best.
Right.
At what he did. And it's like it's a painstaking season where it's like you have to watch it and just accept that each episode is not going to fulfill the story you think we're telling, but you have to accept each episode as its own individual episode, and then just pay attention and see what comes back up. Because when you get to episode 10, it all makes sense.
No, because episode 10.
Baby, what? And it's like, it makes sense in the, because it's like, how you get there is insane. Like, that is a twist that you have to really trust that your audience cares about the story you're telling to pull off what they pulled off. Because it was easy to be like, I might just have to turn this season off. Like, it might not be for me no more. Like, that's really how I felt. And then I'm like, I'm so glad I saw Carmi get locked in that fridge. Because if I didn't see that, I would have never understood the show.
Something else. Oh yeah, and just for the people listening, because I don't think we gave the clearest timeline on the restaurant itself. So season 1, the original beef is the restaurant that's owned by Carmi's family, and then by the end of season 1, they have enough money to try to franchise the restaurant.
They realize and they sink in the ship in the original beef, and they go to their uncle who has money and ask him for money.
Right. But then they have to pay him back first in order to do that. They find the money, literally find the money.
That was so crazy.
At the end of season 1. And so season 2 is their journey to refurnishing and making a restaurant of their own that they're going to call the Bear.
Right.
And so they said that they had 6 months, but Carmi cut that in half and said, no, I'm giving this restaurant a 3-month timeline.
And I think that was also about like the profit margins. Like, if they waited 6 months, it would have taken them longer to make the money back to hit their loan. And like, it was about the loan period and things like that. So they cut it in half.
And so for the whole of season 2, what we're waiting for essentially is the restaurant to be in tip-top shape for them to open.
Right.
And then
so it's the 12 weeks till opening, essentially.
And the finale is opening night.
Well, the finale is friends and family.
Yeah.
So it's like it's what we call in theater like an invited dress rehearsal.
Yes.
So It's like almost the end, and then episode 10, since it is friends and family, it's them serving their menu for the first time for people that are not them, which of course is an opportunity for chaos. And like what I was telling Caleb is that if you watch episode 10 of season 2 and you watch, I want to say it was episode 7 of season 1 as opposed to 8, but 7, they are the exact same episode in different restaurants essentially, but they're the same episode of like Carmi tries to institute something new and it does not work. And that's when I was like, oh, we realized like Carmi was the chaos, but we also, by now, if you're listening to this episode, but like, we don't see the restaurant being built in season 2 because Carmi's not around and fell in love with some girl, and he's not where he's supposed to be.
Been there.
Child. That was so, I don't even know how to move forward from that sentence.
No, but something to talk about is the fact that Carmi was distracted because for the first, we're told that he's never had a girlfriend before.
Right.
In general. So.
And it's not because he's ugly.
Right.
He's not ugly.
As the internet loves to remind.
I'm not gonna lie, Jeremy Allen White kind of cute. I don't really play in the snow like that, but he's cute.
Short king.
He's short. And like, it's like tall don't mean that the person next to you is short. It just means you tall. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Right. No, I think he's 5'7".
Oh God. That's a jump scare.
That's a crazy reaction.
That's a jump scare, Caleb. 5'7"?
You're gonna have to apologize to the 5'7".
I'm not apologizing to the short kings.
So,
back to your point. Yes.
Carmi has never had a girlfriend. And this is the first time that we are led to believe, based off of
everyone's responses,
that this is the first time he's also been happy. Like, it's the first time that he let himself have something.
And in that, he lost the other thing that makes him happy, which is his focus and love of the restaurant. Right.
Which is why we get that gut wrenching.
Y'all, if you want to see some of this, episode 10 is a perfect episode of television. Episode 6 is also a perfect episode of television, but episode 10 is a secret perfect episode because you think it's going well. You think it's just general chaos. And then Carmen gets locked in the fridge. Which I'm going to tell y'all now. I've always had a fear of being stuck in a walk-in. That is like one of the biggest fears that I ever always have had as a server. Even at like the job that I've worked at most recently that I was a server in, like I was terrified. I used to hate it because like you couldn't see out of it either. Like it wasn't a clear door. Like it was like a solid door. So if you closed it, like you couldn't see out. And I was always terrified that I was going to get locked in. So watching this episode, I now know that it's not an irrational fear. It can happen to you. And he was locked in there for a good listen. They left him in there for about 45 minutes to an hour. Like they was just like,
right. Because the restaurant, it's in the middle of this trial night, and they said, all right, we can't spend time trying to get him out. So
yo, Sydney, Richie looked at Sydney and said, what do you want to do? She paused. She said, Richie was like, I can run Expo. She said, okay. And they left that man to his own devices.
Right. And
it wasn't like he had a coat on. He just had his regular chef clothes.
Thankfully, there was some time for Tina to be able to walk over and be like, hey, checking in.
She had her ear pressed to the door. You good in there? You go around me. No! Right. I think the show being like, I think the fact that like the folks in the show are Italian really just makes the show that much better. Because it just leaned into, I feel like it leaned into a lot of stereotypes, and I'm sure like maybe Italian people have like thoughts about their representation on the show. But like the fact that they were just like also like expressive with their emotions.
Right.
They're just always yelling. And I appreciate that. Oh. It was not a show about men who held in their feelings, okay? They were going to tell you they was upset. And he was in that walk-in fridge cussing everybody and their mama out.
No, everybody and their mama. And then, he does get to the moment of self-reflection.
Jesus.
Where he starts hurting. And he says, maybe I don't deserve happiness. Maybe I should.
Well, because he said, remember, it starts with, I let everyone down. It starts with, I wasn't there for y'all when you needed. I wasn't answering my phone because I was out here doing whatever I was doing. And he's like, who am I to think that I can have, because I think it really goes into the question of like, who am I to think that I can have it all? Because he was like, when I was happy, I'm losing the restaurant. When I'm focused on the restaurant, I'm not happy. And there was like that like moment. And then it goes into what you were saying, which you tell that part because it was, I can't do it. I'll cry.
Where he starts reflecting and he's like, maybe I don't deserve it. Maybe I don't deserve to be happy. And I should be throwing myself fully into work, which as an artist, I have been there mentally. Like I have made those considerations and thankfully not there right now, but it's a very serious thing to think like, okay, I have this talent, I have this gift, I have this, and I need to make sacrifices for it. Like,
and there's some truth to that, right? Like there are sacrifices that have to be made.
Right.
But he was an example of someone who went to the extreme of no dating life, no social life, no outside hobbies, doesn't sleep well, doesn't eat well for this thing. And there's a difference. Like there has to be a balance of like, cool, maybe it means that I'm not going on trips every month. Maybe it means I miss a lot of concerts that I might otherwise go to. But like, maybe on Sunday afternoons, I knit. Like, you have to find some type of balance. I think that's like, even as a creative myself, it's just like, that's the thing I've been trying to figure out. And that's what like Hot Girl Summer Camp on TikTok has been for me, of like trying to find fun things to do outside of my work. Has Hot Girl Summer Camp had an episode in 2 weeks? No. Because I've been busy. Booked and busy, child. Booked, busy, and sleepy, okay? Pray for me. Jesus be some caffeine. But it's like that moment is crazy because he's talking to Tina and he's like, I let y'all down, da-da-da. And what gets me is this. Tina says, I'll be right back. And the thing is this, when Tina was talking to him, she announced herself. Hey! And she calls, I love how she calls him, she would say, instead of saying chef, she would say Jeff.
Right, yeah.
And so then she was like, Jeffrey, how you doing in there? And he's like, ah! And it's like, she was like, I'm gonna be right back. And he keeps talking. And I don't know if he doesn't hear Tina or if he assumed that she was back faster.
Or maybe he's just in that
therapy
session.
Because sometimes you're just there and that's just where you are. But he's just, I don't deserve it. And do I deserve it? And, who am I to think that I can have this? Like, you know what? Like, I don't need to be in a relationship. Like, I can't do it. Like, honestly, all of this is a waste of time because I can't do this and I can't have this and bop, 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 bop. But it really just ends with, this whole relationship is a waste of time. I need to be single, is essentially how it ends in some paraphrasing of it. And then we hear a voice from the other side of the fridge. And I love the way they shot this because we're still on the inside of the fridge with him. And you just hear a voice go, well, if that's how you feel.
Heart's breaking.
When I tell y'all, I slid down the couch. Claire just sitting over there going, dang, Carmi. And she had just said that she loved him on the voicemail, but he didn't know that because he hadn't listened to the voicemail yet.
And when he heard it and realized what he had done inadvertently, oh, wow.
And then, to make it all better, to put salt in the wound, here comes my favorite character of the show. The best man of the show, Richie. He sees Claire crying and he comes to the fridge. He's like, cousin, what did you say to that girl? And my favorite thing is how we just assume that he hurt the girl. Because I was like, I feel like your friends usually should assume your side. Richie said, absolutely not. I know you fumble the bag at all times. What did you do to this girl? And then they get into an argument from, my thing is, how you arguing and pissing this many people off from inside a fridge?
From inside a fridge?
You're in isolation, bro. What are you doing?
Yeah, no.
When Jesus went away for 40 days and 40 nights, he wasn't pissing nobody off but the devil. How you pissing off people inside a walk-in fridge? You only been in there for 30 minutes.
Could not be me.
Y'all watch the episode because even we're telling the story, but you're not getting the story.
You're not getting it. You don't understand.
Mm.
The ones who get it.
No. We should wrap up or start to wrap up, but yeah. I will say my favorite episode of this season definitely was Richie's episode when he goes to stage at that restaurant because he's so anti. Like, he is so anti all these, like, Carmi, you sent me there to embarrass me. I don't, all this extra, why am I cleaning forks? To then really you see this transformation into this man who, like, buys in. He's like, why is customer service important? Why is creating an experience important? He really, like, buys in. He starts wearing suits. He starts to care more about himself and therefore more about the business and the family legacy. And it was just like it's a beautiful moment. I think, not to spoil it too much, but there's a moment where he gets a chance to go above and beyond for a customer. And you just see the light bulb. Because he's like, he does everything. And they're like, he's like, can I deliver it to the table? And they let him deliver the surprise. And it's a beautiful, beautiful moment that then in episode 10, the finale, they do another similar surprise moment for their uncle. And you're like, Richie gets it. And it's just a beautiful, like, I don't know, something about, like, because Richie's a hard guy. He's a gruff guy, he's whatever. But there's just, like, a lightness and a softness that comes out of that experience for him that previously we only saw when he was talking to his daughter. And it just starts to, like, permeate his existence. And I thought it was just it's a beautiful, lovely episode that I just really, really love.
I do agree that, like, of all the character episodes, Richie's was just monumental.
Monumental. We learned so much about him.
And also, real quick on that surprise, I thought they were just going to do a beep, bop, here you go.
No! They made it still.
Whew. They chefed that up.
They ate that. Honestly, I might go, that's an episode you could, if you're having a bad day, you could really rewatch that episode and have a better one. Like, that's one of those kinds of moments.
And my favorite episode, we just talked about it, season 2, episode 10.
Yeah.
Something to pay attention to if you want to see why I love it so much is because when they are in the kitchen, you hear the kitchen noises, you hear the kitchen chaos.
Yes.
The second that they go through that door in one take, might I add?
In one take. Silence,
restaurant ambiance.
When I tell you
music playing,
those kitchen sounds are the sounds of my nightmares. Like, I feel them in my spirit. Sometimes I wake up and I'm still taking orders. Like, it's like, those are like the things that, like, freak me out and cause me stress. But that, And then episode 6, I've mentioned it a few times, but like that's just like separate from the show itself. That is just one of my favorite episodes of television that I've seen in a very, very long time. Now, talking about Jamie Lee Curtis, you know what she was doing in that episode? Acting her ass off. If we're going to award a Jamie Lee Curtis performance, that was the one to award because she had way more screen time in that episode than she had in Everything Everywhere All at Once at the same time, upside down and backwards. So, no shade to Miss Curtis. I like her. But she was acting her ass off on that Christmas episode.
You know, they all were.
Her and them red acrylic nails was driving me insane. Insane.
When Bob Odenkirk was telling that man he was nothing.
First of all, I was about to fight. That fork, y'all, if you want to see a well-written episode that understands rules of threes, that understands building character and dynamic tension, that understands pacing, that understands ensemble work, and really just like, that's an episode. Like if I was teaching, like when I become a like professor and I'm like fly with like, you know, and I'm like 50 with like my big glasses and I'm like cool and I like teach, you know, in between seasons of my shows. Like that's an episode that will be on my syllabus. We will be watching and discussing that episode. That is an insanely amazing piece of work.
And for all you non-bear heads out there, you can watch it without knowing any of the plot because it's not connected.
Yeah, it's like it sets, if you watch the show, it sets up under, like it gives you understanding for things you've seen. But like my dad watched parts of it. I think he fell asleep and you know whatever. But like he watched parts of it and he was like,
It's like
insert black dad noises and faces.
That episode is very similar to episode.
Yes.
In the middle of the seasons, yeah.
Yes. Last little fun fact for people who didn't know this, which I found out late as well. Matty Matheson, the actor who plays Neil Fack, who we just know as Fack in the show, he's the Beef's handyman. He's a chef in real life, y'all. And he owns like multiple restaurants in Toronto, and he's also the producer and culinary consultant for The Bear. So they're actually like, they have a culinary producers. They do like work with real chefs to create, you know, recipes and things like that, which I'm glad they do, or else we'd be sitting here going, y'all just making spaghetti and meatballs every time. I don't understand what's going on here. But that was just like a little like fun Easter egg that I was just like, wow.
You know, it's a great Easter egg because he's not even like one of the chefs. Like he's not like, he wasn't a part of he's just a guy who came.
He's just like a friend. And then it's by season 2, he's no longer just the handyman. He also goes as a part of the front of house team.
Right.
I love that how they did their front of house team. I think that's just, it was a beautiful thing of like elevating and promoting from within and then like backfilling. Like they didn't just go out and hire a whole bunch of people. It was like, no, like let's give Richie training. Like Richie's not really a cook, so let's give him training on how to do front of house. Like I thought that was so smart, so well done. If you guys can't tell, we really enjoy this show. It's really a jam. It is worth the 18 episodes for the 2 seasons. But I really love it. Yeah.
I agree. It's quite a delight.
It's a delightful show. And there are performances that we didn't get to talk about, but like everybody is great in the show. And I think everybody has at least 1 or 2 moments in it themselves as actors and the characters. And I think it's a really wonderful show full of a lot of people that we should just continue to watch out for.
Indeed.
Yeah. But with that, this has been another episode of the No Sleep Till Hollywood podcast. It is your girl, Gaelyn Smith. You can follow me at GSmitty with 2 T's and 4 Y's on anything with a @ symbol.
It is your boy, Caleb McDonald. You can follow me at Caleb Subtitles, promoting comedy shows, you know, because that's happening now.
Back on stage era. We back outside. Back on stage era. We should drop a mixtape. Back on stage era. I don't have any raps though.
How about a single? How
single.
about we drop a single back on stage?
The Back Outside Boys beat, and then it's back on stage era. Something on the strip, back on the stage, back on the stage. I'm ready to live. Because I don't like that. Why? I don't like that Drake says he's ready to die. I don't like that for him.
Back on stage, boys. I'm ready to act.
There you go. He could have said ready to sing. There were so many things that he could have said. I don't like that he won't. I'm with his mama. There's a negativity in his music, and I'm concerned for him. And make sure you guys follow. It's time to flip out of where I was at. Y'all know I'm my auntie. And make sure you follow us at No Sleep Till Hollywood on the Instagrammies. And yeah, listen to us wherever you get your podcast from. But if you're on Spotify, we just 1% more. But with that, good night, good morning, good evening, adios, bonjour, bonsoir. Bye, guys.
I